Each time I see one 3,000-year-old text exists that details exactly where the human soul travels after death, not in symbols or vague verse but with distinct locations, angel names, and actual geography. One man in all of history passed to the other side without dying and came back holding that map. It was used by the apostles, read by the early fathers of the Christian faith, and then it vanished not because the scholars rejected it, but because what it revealed was too unsettling for the church. But before disclosing what that man saw, you must understand just how the text survived. In the highlands of Ethiopia, a community of monks hand-copied it for 3,000 unbroken years. They did not treat it as a historical artifact, but as holy scripture read in their services each week. While the Western world forgot its name, that old African church preserved every word intact. The man behind that map was Enoch, and all he recorded was buried with deliberate intent. Only in Genesis alone does it say God took him without death, a declaration with no equal anywhere within the Bible. The Book of Enoch is not a fringe work born of some dark and entirely forgotten sect. It is one of the most ancient texts in history with an extraordinary record of transmission. Scholars trace it to at least 300 years before Christ, perhaps several centuries before. It will predated Rome when the empire was not power before the legions had yet conquered the known world. It was already a venerated and deeply old text when Jesus walked through the Jerusalem. Those who wrote the New Testament knew it, had read it openly, cited it. The Epistle of Jude, a book still found in every Bible, directly cites the Book of Enoch. Jude 1:14 openly identifies Enoch, and that passage does not exist in the Hebrew scripture. It derives from chapter 1:9 of the Book of Enoch, verbatim. Tertullian, in the 2nd century, ardently upheld its authenticity before the early church. Origen cited it, Clement of Alexandria invoked it, and it spread freely among the early believers. It was not concealed or buried in the early centuries of Christianity. It was honored and taught. Then something shifted in the 4th century as the Roman Empire formally embraced Christianity. Political power fused with theological rule, and particular councils began to draw limits. They decided which texts belonged to the Holy Canon and which ones should be permanently removed. The Council of Laodicea in the year 363 and Carthage's council held in the year 397 drew those lines. The Book of Enoch fell outside those limits, and the reasons given were purely technical at heart: uncertain authorship, content hard to align with the forming canon, text too old. But not one of those reasons explains the sheer urgency with which it vanished. What its content revealed on death, judgment, and the layout of the underworld was deeply troubling. It clashed with the simplified narrative that the organized church was shaping about the afterlife. For 1400 years, not one complete copy of the Enoch text in Europe, none. Scholars knew the text existed because they saw it cited in Jude and the patristic writers, but the text itself had vanished as if systematically removed from Western recorded history. In 1773, the Scottish explorer James Bruce returned from Ethiopia carrying something entirely unexpected. He carried 3 handwritten copies of a holy text that the Western world believed lost forever. He traveled to one of the oldest Christian nations in the world with an unbroken lineage. Ethiopia had never taken part in the church councils that excluded Enoch from the Western canon. The Ethiopian church had preserved it as a living text copied by its monks without cease, recited in its services, taught in seminaries, guarded with the same care as the Gospels. While the West set boundaries of acceptable faith, Ethiopia held a complete record. While the West dug through medieval ruins, the text stayed alive in the hands of living Ethiopian monks. And then in 1947, it became impossible to dismiss, even for the most rigorous skeptics. In caves along the northern shore of the Dead Sea, archaeologists found the Dead Sea Scrolls. Within them were several fragments of the Book of Enoch in Aramaic, old, pre-Christian, and preserved, hidden by a Jewish sect that viewed them as too holy to allow to perish. 7 copies in 7 distinct caves, all verifying the same text that Ethiopia had kept safe. The Book of Enoch was not a medieval forgery, nor was it invented in later periods. It was a widely honored text, carefully preserved and verified by multiple separate sources, a text that detailed with disturbing and sustained precision what exists on the other side, death. Now the pages reveal what they hold will change how you have seen death until this day. When most people hear the word Sheol, they picture a vague idea, the grave, the realm of the dead, a kind of formless theological holding room without structure or distinctions among those inside. That is the account that the canonical texts retained, drained of detail and cut down to shadow. What the Book of Enoch reveals is something entirely different and far more precise than that. In chapters 22 to 27, called the Book of the Watchers, Enoch journeys. He is led by the archangel Uriel on a voyage to the edges of the earth beyond the visible realm. He is shown mountains, rivers, and forms that exist beyond what living eyes can see. And there, at the far rim of the known cosmos, Enoch observes the Sheol as it truly exists. What arrests him completely in tracks, Sheol is neither a single chamber nor an empty void. According to Enoch, it holds 4 distinct hollow caverns cut into the rock of a great mountain, each one entirely apart from the others. Each one built for a specific category of soul, 4 chambers, 4 distinct places based on the nature of how each soul lived and died, not in a final verdict that has not yet come, but in what the soul truly was in its lifetime. Think about what that means. Death does not bring sleep or to a uniform holding space. The soul is at once evaluated on arrival, sorted with mathematical exactness, set where it belongs, before the resurrection, before final judgment, before the end of all that the cosmos holds. The first chamber that Enoch reveals shines from within, and a spring of water flows within it. Those souls rest in peace apart from the dark by what the text calls a chasm of light. These are the souls of the righteous who had lived aligned with truth and died without violence. They endure no torment. They are not in shadow. They wait, but in a place prepared specifically for them. Yet the second chamber differs radically, different, and its content shakes all who read it. The second chamber holds those who were righteous but were slain by violent men. They've endured unjust deaths, and their state contrasts sharply with the calm of the first chamber. Their cries echo along the stone walls, crying for justice, insisting that their blood be repaid. Enoch asks the angel about this, and the reply he gets is devastating in its precise detail. These souls will not rest until their killers have met the judgment they deserve. Their appeal is being heard right now before any final court has convened. Then comes the third chamber, and here tone of the text itself drops sharply. All of a sudden, this covers those who died in sin, neither victims nor great offenders, just common people. They lived in daily wrongdoing and died without ever answered for what they had done. They are not in active pain, but they are not consoled either. They in a hollow suspension. They exist in a quiet that is itself a form of judgment, a state void of light and without sound. And then there is the fourth chamber, and text spends little time here because it simply doesn't need to. Its account is brief, but the gravity it holds is almost too heavy for someone reading it for the very first time. The fourth holds the souls of those who did deep evil and never once sought correction. There is no flowing water. Here, no light exists. There is no cry for mercy, only total darkness. These souls are already experiencing consequences before any final verdict has declared anything. This detail is not a minor point. It is structural blow to an entire theological view of the beyond. If Sheol is already sorted, if the souls are in their places based on what they were in life, precisely. So the sorting does not await any priest or any sacrament or any official approval. At the instant the last breath exits the body, the reckoning begins at once on its own. That is a threatening idea for any institution, draws its power from holding control of what comes next. One detail in the account of the first chamber that most summaries omit entirely and could be the most vital of the entire text, the one that links Enoch the most to the New Testament. Enoch depicts a spring of water, not a symbol, not a poetic image, but a literal spring described with same precise specificity with which a surveyor would describe a river on earth. It simply exists as if it had always existed, as if the water in spot were natural. For anyone who has read the New Testament closely, this detail creates cold recognition. In the Gospel of Luke chapter 16, Jesus tells the tale of the rich man and Lazarus. But that rich man dies and finds himself in realm of torment with no possibility of escape or ease. Lazarus the beggar also dies and is taken to Abraham's side in comfort and in complete peace. The rich man stares across a vast, impassable abyss and sees Lazarus across the divide in the light. He begs Abraham to send a drop of water to cool his tongue scorched by heat. One drop of water, he can see it from where he stands. He knows it beyond the vast and great abyss, but that gulf between his chamber and theirs is impassable. Abraham confirms it openly. Water, an abyss, division between the righteous and the unjust, several chambers with simultaneous states. All of this taking place before any final judgment being made in an intermediate state. Jesus was not creating this geography. He traced the map that Enoch had drawn earlier using the same elements and in the same order as if both were depicting the same place because in fact they both were, and the manuscripts verify this without any doubt whatsoever. The question this poses is not whether the link between the two texts is real. The manuscripts verify it. The question is why this link was never maintained within the tradition after the early centuries. Why did the doctrine that kept the words of Jesus remove the text that clarified them most clearly? It was simpler to bury the map than to face that question, and that is exactly what occurred. There is a figure within the Book of Enoch, does not appear by name in Western canonical text, but whose role is detailed with such precision that it becomes impossible to call it a myth. His name, Uriel, one of 4 archangels in Enoch's tradition, each with clear roles. Michael the warrior, Gabriel the herald, Raphael the healer, and Uriel with a totally different role. Uriel means the flame or light of God, and his assigned role is the one tied most directly to death of all. Uriel is the keeper of Sheol. He is the one who leads Enoch through chambers in full. It is Uriel who reveals the classification, the spring, the gulf, the cries of the slain souls. It is Uriel who acts as the keeper of the dead, the angel who knows each soul by name. He knows just each one belongs and ensures it lands precisely at the place it belongs to without error. And Uriel is almost entirely absent from the Western Christian record, carefully erased. The Catholic Church officially names only 3 archangels, and Uriel's role has been reduced. Vaji, those councils that removed the Book of Enoch moved in the same direction regarding Uriel. The souls of their offspring, the Nephilim who died in the flood, find no place in Sheol. This implied that death is not a passive event, but a living process overseen by its own authority, a force with a clear mandate to ensure that no soul goes to the wrong place without exception, a power that operates wholly independently of any human religious or political institution. The Ethiopian practice never enacted that erasure, and contrast reveals what was truly at stake. In Ethiopia's Orthodox Church, Uriel is honored, has a feast day, and is included in prayers. He is seen as the angel standing at the threshold once the body fails and before the vigil. His presence in the cosmology of death is not symbolic or ornamental. It is functional and real. What does it mean that one of the oldest arms of Christianity upheld this belief for 17 centuries? While Western tradition erased the guardian angel's name, someone made that choice with care. A calculated and institutional choice to remove the specific angel, the exact chambers, the spring, all that made Sheol an active and living reality rather than a vague stand-in for judgment. There is a section in the Book of Enoch that does not directly describe Sheol, but sheds clarity on its removal. It involves the watchers, the beings, found in Genesis 6 as the sons of the future, God who came down and took human women and fathered children of enormous power, called the Nephilim. The canonical Bible spends 3 verses on them and proceeds as if the topic were too unsettling. The Book of Enoch devotes entire chapters to their identities, crimes, their fate, and their present position. According to Enoch, the watchers did not just vanish after the flood as canonical texts claim. They were chained, imprisoned under the earth in bonds of darkness in a place bordering Sheol. They await a judgment not yet delivered, bound in the region adjacent to the 4 chambers. The spirits of his children, the Nephilim, who died in the flood, have no place in Sheol. They occupy a strange cosmic no man's land between confinement and complete freedom. Jude speaks of angels who did not guard their own realm, kept in endless chains under darkness. Peter speaks of spirits in chains to whom Christ himself spoke after his death. These are not vague theological claims. They are references to the system that Enoch had outlined. Eva, mis itman fords died a fords and mina forsnack. Vision where the afterlife includes captive supernatural beings and named guardian angels. Active trial before the last day, and a landscape far more complex than what the Western canon contains. This is what could not stay accessible, not because it was false, but because too whole. A map that includes the rooms of Sheol, the spring of the just, and the cries of the dead. That map allows no room for institutional power because it works without the need for any human authority. A map where divine justice is already being enacted without waiting for anyone to allow or approve it. That map had to be sealed, and so it was for 14 centuries until the sands spoke. There is something else that the Book of Enoch reveals about Sheol, that its removal kept from reaching the west. This may be the most profound revelation of the entire text. Even beyond the 4 chambers, it centers on what occurs to the soul between death and resurrection and its connection with God. In chapters 47 and 133, souls in Sheol, not yet severed, are depicted, they are not in a total, isolated void. They are conscious and connected to the world of the living. They feel time passing from within the chambers and sustain an active bond with the heavens. The souls of the just have their names held before the presence of God, not asleep nor forgotten. The slain souls cry out, and those pleas are being heard from the divine presence. This means that silence about the dead is not spiritually neutral but an absence with consequences. This reveals something that the removal of the Book of Enoch quietly eliminated from Western thought. The relationship between the living and dead is not broken in death but rather transforms into another form. The dead remain somewhere aware, and the living and the dead stay connected. By Enoch's account, all of this is not superstition. It mirrors the true fabric of the cosmos we inhabit. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church has long offered prayers for the dead for 17 unbroken centuries. These customs are rooted in a view that the Book of Enoch upholds with documentary precision, that belief that the dead remain present and that what we do reaches them has a genuine origin. It may stem not from tradition for tradition's sake, but in the witness of one who was actually there. Enoch not die, and that fact appears in only 8 words within the text of the Hebrew text. Genesis 5:24. Enoch walked with God and then was no more, for God had taken him. He did not die. He departed without illness, without aging, without the required passage through any of the 4 chambers. And the man who was led not in death wrote in precise and careful detail about the layout of those chambers. He saw Sheol not in a dream, but as an eyewitness guided by Uriel through passage. A man who saw those chambers from within and came back as the only living witness to what awaits all. A map studied across centuries, kept in the highlands of Africa, confirmed at Qumran, cited in the New Testament, and then deliberately erased from Western religious thought, erased precisely at the moment when that world was centralizing its grip on what could be believed. Now that map is in your hands. The 4 rooms, the spring, the cries, the angel at the threshold, the bound watchers, the living awareness of the patient dead, all survived against all odds. It endured in a church in the highlands the councils of Rome could not reach. It endured in clay, jars buried in desert caves by all who held it sacred. It endured in the notes of thinkers who could not ignore what it said, though it contradicted orthodoxy. And now it is open to all who seek it. The complete text, rendered and accessible tonight. The full Book of Enoch has been rendered in Spanish. You can read it tonight without any limits. When you reach chapter 22, you will discover exactly what you read without any help. You will identify the rich man and Lazarus, the call for justice, the spring, and the vast abyss. You will notice a worldview that the writers of the New Testament had and assumed everyone knew. An audience that had not yet been robbed of the text that made all that old cosmology coherent. But the inquiry that this knowledge poses is not simply historical, academic, or archaeological. Should the afterlife bear the structure Enoch mapped? If the souls are already in their assigned spots? If justice is already partly served, issued before the final judgment, then the most critical question changes. It is not which councils chose which texts were fit to guide the faith of countless people. The most vital question is for which chamber you are being built, not at the final verdict but now, in the choices of each day, in the concrete way you deal with those who cannot themselves, in how you react to injustice, in how you handle a world that, according to this chart, being watched, far more observed, and far more subject to scrutiny than any religious body has ever informed you. Enoch moved through those chambers and returned with the map. He recorded everything. and that text has survived. Somewhere in the mountains of Ethiopia, a monk copies it by hand at this very moment, repeating it as those before did 1,000 years ago, guarding what someone wanted to erase. The record still stands. The four chambers remain waiting, and Uriel already knows each name. If this has opened something within you and you wish to keep discovering the texts that others tried to erase, subscribe